This is the fourth lecture of the third section. I cut this in half, and so the end of the last one is probably pretty abrupt, and this one may sound abrupt when you started on the next slide, but the last one turned out to be too long. So we're still talking about the liberal paradigm in international relations. We'll also address constructivism here at the end. If we look at how this is achieved, um, the liberal paradigm uses a couple of different terminologies here. A regime is something that is positive and something that just uh, typifies a working relationship among nation states in this theoretical context. It's a neutral term in international relations, and it's a set of rules, norms, and procedures around which the expectations of actors converge in a certain issue area. Well, what does that mean? What does it apply to? We think of international cooperation as formal regimes that are oftentimes institutionalized. And so the rules, norms, and procedures of international trade are formalized in the World Trade Organization. The rules, norms, and procedures of environmental protection are formalized in things like the Kyoto Protocol. A regime doesn't have to be formal, it can be informal, but these two ideas or terminologies oftentimes go hand in hand. And so then, these formal institutions and working with other nation states produce a level of cooperation that serves a positive outcome for nation states. It increases the openness or transparency, letting us know what other nation states are doing. Thereby, we can know if we want to continue to cooperate or stop cooperating with them. It makes their bad behavior, I have here cheating, more visible. Thereby, we know whether or not we can trust that other nation state. It provides forums for negotiation. It provides forums for repeated interactions with other nation states. Based on this, perhaps you can build trust with other nation states and lessen the incentive to retract from world politics, retract from cooperation, and be more engaged in cooperation. And not only international institutions or international organizations do that, formal regimes, but also international law. International laws come from treaties, typically, but they also come from customs and general principles and legal scholarship. They don't come from an international legislature. The UN exists, but they don't establish laws to that extent. But there is a problem with international law. Cheating does occur, they are broken, and that's because international laws are voluntary. Nation states are still going to clash over their self interests. And so then an international law is only good um, to the extent that it aligns with your self interest as a nation state. When it does, you're going to voluntarily abide by that international law. And so voluntary compliance occurs when countries obey the laws because they accept those laws' legitimacy. But oftentimes, if it comes up against your self interest as a nation state, you have to be coerced. And so coercion is the process of gaining compliance through threats of violence or imprisonment or economic sanctions. That's the key way to coerce nation state behavior. Economic sanctions are typically is, and one that we see in U.S. foreign policy quite often. The key problem with international law is enforcement. And so then we still see that despite cooperation, despite these laws existing, nation states in their rational self-interest will break these agreements. So what influences does all this have on U.S. foreign policy? Well, we see that the U.S. has historically been key in building international organizations, in building and writing international laws. For example, the U.S. was key in building the United Nations and is still one of the most powerful members of that organization. Similarly for NATO, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the United States, as we'll see in our economic chapter, is in the leadership position in those two economic organizations. It influences our foreign policy in our working with other nation states on a variety of issues. This is what multilateralism is a reference to. Rather than going it alone in the world, unilateralism, the United States typically wants to work with other nation states to achieve our goals. And so we see then the liberal influence there. For example, trade agreements with other countries is a definitional outcome of multilateralism, as are agreements on social issues like ending poverty, trying to prevent the spread of disease, trying to prevent the spread of drugs, and environmental issues. And so in all these ways, we see then the liberal paradigm influence our foreign policy. Constructivist theory is a new set of ideas in international relations. And it's one of those things that's kind of difficult to understand unless you get really deep into it, something that we don't necessarily need for this class. But I'll give you some bare bones understanding. Constructivists argue that world politics is shaped by identity and ideas. And so foreign policy in a constructed world is going to be influenced by nation states' common identities with one another. Democracies promoting democracy, for example. Capitalist nation states promoting capitalism to others. And in this way, constructivists say that the world is socially constructed based on those beliefs, based on those ideas, and based on the common identities of nation states promoting those throughout the world. And so if you look at the nation states we call ourselves the best allies of, we have that common identity with them, those common practices, those common goals. And according to constructivists, this is the reason that are allies, and this is the reason that we cooperate with them more effectively and efficiently than with countries that are different than us. Constructivists will argue that perceptions of reality, norms, identities, behaviors are subjective. They're not objective. They're based on the relative beliefs of different nation states, and that the identity of a nation state is going to matter to its foreign policy. We are a democracy in the United States. We are a open market economic system, and so our foreign policy is based on those things. Other countries don't have those same ideologies, and so their foreign policies will be based on something else. So in this way, you might see that constructivist ideas, if you believe these sets of principles, may be influential on our foreign policy. Throughout the rest of the course, we'll reference realism or reference idealism. We may reference constructivism as well, but it was important to have these theories in mind as we proceed, so we have a good understanding of why certain decisions are made, why certain approaches are taken by our government when it comes to the exercise of our foreign policy. If you look at this table from your book, it gives the different perspectives on one particular situation or one particular relationship, that is, our relationship towards China. And so you see the different outcomes or different foreign policy prescriptions based on the theoretical takes of these different ideas. Realism, right, would have us believe that our relationship with China and thus our foreign policy towards China presents a challenge to U.S. dominance or U.S. supremacy, power preponderance. And so it challenges the unipolar or hegemonic nature of the United States. And so our response then would be to strengthen our military forces with an emphasis on the Asia and Pacific region, to resist Chinese military expansion. But liberals will have a different perspective. Liberals will say, well, we have to focus on cooperation. We have to focus on trade as well as part of our foreign policy goals. And so then, the arrival of the People's Republic of China into a globalized, interdependent, and constitutional world order would have us engage China through diplomacy, through global governance, through trade, through non-governmental organizations, and promote our cooperation with that nation state. Constructivists would argue that the identity of the United States and the identity of China and their practices are different from one another, and thus China is seen as the other with an alien identity and clashing value system. And so then, our foreign policy towards China may be to promote our own ideals and ideology, to promote human rights, for example, to persuade China to become a responsible citizen, that is, cleaning up after themselves environmentally, not threatening their neighbors militarily, and following the rules of international law as established by, primarily established by Western nation states. And so in this way you can use this table to see the differences and the different foreign policy prescriptions, all of which we kind of see from U.S. foreign policy, and their influences from those theoretical backgrounds.